Hey everyone, it's Jenny from the WoW Creative team. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to create two cards, both of which use the Wreath Builder stencil that you might have seen out there, which allows you to take your stamps and rotate them around a central position 8 times to create these patterns that you see. I thought it might be fun to use a variety of the gold embossing powders that WoW carries, just to show you how they can compare and contrast with each other, as well as getting some fun layering looks. I'm just showing you here a few of the gold embossing powders by WoW that I have in my collection. These are by no means the full extent of all of the powders that WoW carries that have gold in them, but these are some of my more go-to powders, and I thought I would use a bunch of them today. That first one is the metallic gold rich pale. It's probably one of my go-to powders for sentiments, and I'm just showing you here how it compares to the metallic brass, which is also a kind of gold colour, but a little bit browner. I also got this Fool's Gold, which is embossing glitter with a beautiful rich brown gold tone. And not shown here, there's also a gold metallic sparkle as well, which is similar but a nice brighter gold colour. This Black Magic is a nice big chunky black, silver and gold. And then you also saw there the Gold Pearl, which is great for embossing on dark cardstock, and the Rose Gold, which is a beautiful pinky gold. It's a colour mix, a colour blend powder. Now I'm going to show you just really quickly how I create the swatches for my pots, as a few people had been asking about this. So what I do is I take a strip of cardstock, I swipe my embossing ink pad over it and then heat emboss it. When that cools down, I repeat that 2 or 3 more times depending on how translucent the powder is. And then I use this 1-inch punch. I find the punches are much quicker and easier than using a circle die. This one is by EK Success, but you could use any punch that you've got. And then I pop out a 1-inch circle and it fits perfectly onto the top of my pot. This powder that I'm using here is Sandcastle. It's a beautiful mix of big chunks of gold and embossing glitter and white from a trio. And then I just pop it on the top with some liquid adhesive and leave it to dry. And that way I can see from a quick glance, looking down into my drawer, all of the embossing powder colours that I've got. So on to the first card. I'm using the Wreath Builder stencil. This is by Gina K, and I have a panel of cardstock. This is actually pre-cut cardstock from Gina K, but it's 3 3/4 inch white cardstock, and I've placed it into my MISTI. It's really important to have a stamp positioning tool for this technique. Now I'm going to be using my powder tool in between every single heat embossing step to create these cards. It's because, as you notice, as I rotate the panel, I put my fingers on it, and so I'm going to be getting, grease from my fingers, just that will encourage embossing powder to stick where we don't want it. So I'm using my powder tool in between every heat embossing step. So I'm using this mandala maker first. This is also from Gina K, and it's got lots of elements that you can use to create a mandala or mandala. And I'm going to heat emboss each layer of the mandala in a different gold embossing powder. I thought it would be nice to show how they compare and contrast with each other, but also coordinate with each other on one card. So for that first layer that I've stamped, that intricate filigree design, I've used the metallic gold rich pale embossing powder. And then for that second stamped layer, which is the joining up design, I guess, I've used the metallic brass. And when I show it up close, you'll see that they are slightly different. And certainly the rich pale gold is, I'd say, more yellower. Now for this flower, I'm using the rose gold, and I did get it slightly off. It's the one challenge with using the Wreath Builder with embossing, even though it looks fantastic, is it's a little bit harder to see where you're stamping. So just be careful to not shift that panel of cardstock as you're doing your stamping. I've then moved back to the rich pale gold for that solid stamp that is round the centre there. And then for my central focus piece, I've used the rose gold. So you can see how they compare and contrast with each other. I've then gone back in and I'm going to fill in some of those gaps. and you'll see I just rotate it 1/8 turn and go round. And because you can't see what you're stamping, you do need to count to make sure that you don't double stamp accidentally. So that last piece I've stamped in metallic, I've heat embossed in metallic brass. And then I decided I'd go around the edges of my cardstock with the ink pad directly to the cardstock and then heat emboss it with fool's gold to give it a nice sparkly outer edge. And in a couple of areas I didn't quite get enough embossing powder, so I just, once it had cooled down, added my ink pad directly to the sides again and embossed again. And here's a close-up look of the card. You can see from my sentiment, I die cut a circle of vellum and heat embossed the sentiment from the mandala maker in rose gold. Now for my next card, I'm going to be throwing in some metaline embossing powder. If you're not familiar with them, metaline have a sheen to them. Most of them are, well, certainly the ones I have in my collection have a gold sheen, and we are focusing on gold this month at WOW, so I've thrown these into my card making today. Particularly if you emboss them onto cardstocks that is the same color as the powder, you will certainly get the gold showing up much more prominently than the overall color itself. So this time I'm starting with an A2 panel of black cardstock, and these also work, this size also works great in the Wreath Builder stencil. I'm using the 4 1/4 inch Wreath Builder stencil for this one. I've embossed that initial circle just to be able to place my wreath and work out where it goes. I've embossed that with rose gold. And then I've added 2 leaf sprigs round the edge, which I'm going to emboss in metallic brass. And you'll see that they did emboss over each other, which I kind of didn't plan for, but I actually like the fullness that you get from embossing 2 of the branches over each other. It looks pretty cool. Now this next colour is pearl. This is the gold pearl, and you'll see that when you emboss it, it shows up almost like it tricks your eye. It looks almost green when you add it onto the black. I think it looks fantastic. It's semi-translucent and it layered with that metallic brass, and it just goes perfectly together. Now I'm coming in with the flower. This is the Wreath Builder stamp set from Gina K, and I'm adding that metaline flame over the top, and you'll see when you heat emboss it, that red fades away and the gold becomes much more prominent. If you did that on red cardstock, you would see all gold. That gold sheen is really, really pretty. Now, because my circle was slightly off, I did stamp it again in rose gold and then die cut it out. The sentiment is from the Wreath Builder stamp set, embossed in metallic rich pale gold, and then I popped it up on some foam tape into the center of my wreath just to bring it back to being aligned, and then I popped that panel up onto a black card base. As a finishing touch, I'm adding some Nouveau glitter drops just into the center of those metaline flame flowers, and I left it at that. And that finishes my second card. Super different look on black cardstock, I think you'll agree. And hopefully that gives you some ideas for using the variety of gold powders carried by WOW. Thanks so much for watching today. Be sure to head on over to the other tutorials on the WOW Embossing channel. There's tons to see and tons to learn. Have an awesome day. Bye.